Isabella. It was a name well respected within the Iron Legion. Many had associated her with much of the new values and oaths of engagement set by the new Lord Warden after the fall of Apollyon, and she withheld her oaths as a warden as if they were her very blood. However, the same couldn't be said for her squire, Thomas Lionheart, a noble's son who had only joined the Iron Legion through the good-handed grace of his father, and likely through several shady dealings. Because of this, many refused to take the young boy under their wing as their squire. All except Isabella. She did not know what she saw in the young boy, but she would consider herself a fool as to not try and uncover what it was she did see. So she took the young squire under her wing, and began training him as a warden. Although she would learn she had overestimated her tolerance for the young boy. Thomas was arrogant and spoiled, often gloating to other members and squires within the Legion despite barely being able to hold a sword as correctly at all. Worst of all, he would try and boss around others using Isabella's reputation as leverage to get his way. All habits that Isabella quickly found troublesome and obnoxious. Despite this, she still taught her squire, determined to perhaps teach him humility and selflessness, if nothing else. However, she was getting nowhere, until one day she couldn't find her young squire. Upon some slight investigation, she found that Thomas had challenged another squire to a spar and lost horribly. While everyone was praising the squire on putting the self-centered prick in his place, it was unfortunately up to Isabella to go find and comfort Thomas. It would be a few hours until Isabella finally found Thomas sitting underneath a tree beside a valley of white roses, in the middle of twiddling one of the roses between two of his fingers. Thomas, suddenly down after being startled by Isabella's sudden presence, spoke up first. "Come here to mock me as everyone else has." Isabella raised an eyebrow and stared down at her young apprentice. "What would that make me? Certainly not the warden who took it upon herself to turn you into a mighty warrior." It was obvious that her words offered little comfort to Thomas and his bruised ego. "Then why are you here? Just leave me to wallow in my own uselessness," he replied sharply, attempting to leave no room for Isabella to interject. "You speak as if one loss is the end of the world." Isabella moved to sit down next to him. Yet it wasn't a real battle. She interrupted him before he could even be half done with his sentence, looking up at the foliage above them both. "It was a spar between two squires. There was no risk of death." A silence then creeped around the both of them before Isabella stood up and offered Thomas her hand. "That is why you must be humble, to be grateful. For it is in defeat we learn the most of what holds us back. Should we take the losses we can afford for granted, we may never live to see victory." Thomas finally looked up from the rose between his fingers, but he didn't take Isabella's offer to stand up once more. "My mother loved these white roses, saying it reminded her of the love for my father." He continued to rub his fingers across the petals before dropping the flower to the ground and taking Isabella's hand. "Thank you. I don't know how I can repay you." "Take your training seriously, and remember who it is you fight for." Isabella was quick to respond, handing him his sword decorated in ornate golden embroideries and angelic imagery, before taking her own sword she had set aside nearby, and prepared to engage in practice sparring next to the Valley of Flowers, before returning to the Legion camp. Months later, Isabella awoke to the smell of smoke and cinder. The fort she and Thomas was stationed at was under attack. Scrambling to put together her armor, she ran outside to see fire and panic among her allies, and the faces behind the attack. Horkos. She counted among their forces a number of Zanhu and a handful of Shigokis, with a warmonger seemingly leading the attack. She ran down, leading a small counterattack with a few conquerors and lawbringers she managed to find amidst the panic. She made her way to confront the forces, taking a brutal blow from one of the Shigokis before the attackers began their retreat. As panic finally managed to begin to settle down, Isabella managed to find Thomas among the survivors, with him having helped many of the inexperienced squires to safety to the dungeons during the attack. Isabella and one of the lawbringers began to take count of the fallen, only to find that several people were still unaccounted for. It was then that she was informed that Horkos had taken several as prisoners, and likely had managed to escape with them during their retreat. Among them were commanders and even a few family members who had came to visit, including that of a child. Outraged by the news, Isabella was unfortunately forced to calm herself. She knew that there was no position for them to make a counterattack or attempt a rescue of any kind. With little else the detachment could do, they sent out a letter requesting reinforcements, much to Thomas's anger, which he made clear when he ran into Isabella's private quarters uninvited. "You would have us stand here, idling away precious time!" His outrage was fierce, but not unfounded. "We are in no position to launch a rescue or counterattack in the foreseeable future, so we must take our time to settle down and gather our bearings." Isabella spoke calmly as she glanced over a map of the surrounding area. "Have you forgotten your oaths? To protect those at any cost?" Thomas yelled once more, making the conversation between the two far from private, although Isabella took a deep breath and readied herself, and her following response. "There is little one can do in this situation except wait for reinforcements. Go rest. The attack has no doubt shaken you." Isabella looked back over her shoulder to see Thomas storm out of the room and slam the door behind him. The next day Isabella found herself unable to find her squire, seemingly having disappeared into the night. However, she was startled to find a note on the nightstand next to his cot. It had outlined his plan to infiltrate the Horkos camp and free the captured Iron Legion members alone. Isabella scrambled to put on her armor and grabbed her dented sword that she had neglected to repair after the attack, and quickly got atop her horse, moving as quickly as she could to find the Horkos camp. Time was of the essence, now more than ever. There was no telling what could have happened to Thomas. Had he been thrown with the other prisoners? Executed on the spot? Regardless, she had no time to ponder the possibilities, as now all she could do was focus on action. Approaching the Horkos camp, she was surprised to find that no one was guarding the entrance or perimeter at all. She hid her horse behind some foliage and slowly made her way up towards the camp. Hearing roars of cheer and chanting, she infiltrated the camp slowly and made her way through, making a mental note of things like supplies as she did. However, she eventually found herself overlooking what appeared to be an arena, with cages upon cages, holding various members of the Iron Legion and a few civilians, inexplicably the prisoners that Horkos had taken during their recent attack. In the center was a warmonger, different from the one who had led the attack. However, that didn't comfort Isabella in the slightest, as the warmonger's armor was covered in blood, both fresh and dried. The roars of the crowd grew louder as the warmonger held the helmet of a recently slayed conqueror above their head. However, among the cheers, Isabella could hear the distinct cries of that of a child, and what appeared to be, perhaps someone trying to comfort them. Looking around, it didn't take long for her to find who was chosen next to fight. The cage was opened, and forced out was a kid no older than maybe 5 years old, and accompanying them was Thomas. Isabella's heart sank, and she knew that she had to move quickly in order to stop this. Making her way back to the supplies she had taken note of earlier, she began to look around for anything to possibly help, eventually finding gunpowder and other explosives. She quickly moved to return to the side of the ring, only to be blocked by a peacekeeper. No time could be wasted, however. So when the Peacekeeper moved to attack with her dagger, Isabella took a step to the side, twisting the PK's hand and forcing her to drop the dagger, kicking her back and grabbing the dagger for herself and stabbing at the Peacekeeper's throat. The Peacekeeper managed to catch Isabella's arm before the blade could connect. However, it meant nothing as Isabella slammed the backside of the dagger with her other hand and effortlessly powered through the PK's defense. The dagger, now fiercely secured within the PK's throat, dropped to the ground and bled out to death. Isabella ran out to the makeshift arena from earlier to see Thomas on his last legs, determined to hold off the warmonger from reaching the kid, and launching attacks of his own where he could, no matter how pitiful. Isabella was quick to move. However, her wounds from yesterday and her hastiness to arrive here as fast as she could was beginning to take its toll. Regardless, she lit one bomb. Then two. Then three. And she began throwing them at the members of Horkos who were gathered round the arena, until a fire, a fine red mist, smoke, and gunpowder filled the air. As she jumped down into the arena amidst the chaos with her sword drawn, she turned back to Thomas and yelled, "Get the kid to safety and our comrades out of those cages! I'll hold the line!" Thomas only nodded and quickly began to move to a nearby cage holding the various members of the Iron Legion, making sure that the kid was close by, no more than an arm's length away. Isabella quickly turned her attention to the warmonger, standing only a few feet away from her. As blood and the smell of gunpowder filled the air, both prepared for battle, holding their blades up high and finally charging. A loud metal clang rang through the air amongst the screams and panic of Horkos as the blades collided. Then another. And another. Isabella slammed her shoulder into the warmonger's chest before following up with a swing using her pommel and crossguard. The warmonger screamed out before clawing at Isabella's pauldron and thrusting their sword into Isabella's side. She yelled out in pain before stepping back and preparing a counterattack, only to be interrupted by the warmonger's attempt to land an overhead swing. Isabella dodged to the side before taking the blade of her sword in her grip and swinging at the warmonger's head, crushing the helmet with a sickening crunch as the warmonger dropped dead on the spot. And then Isabella's sword promptly broke in her hands. Isabella dropped what remained of her sword and made her way to find Thomas over to where the cages were, only to find Thomas having fallen into the dirt right in front of one of those cages, with the kid tugging at his standards trying to get him to stand back up. Isabella quickly moved and opened one of the cages, barking orders to get them out of there, and helped with picking up Thomas. She quickly wrapped one of his arms over her shoulder and propped him up with the help of one of the captured Black Priors, and used her other hand to pick up his ornate sword that had fallen at his side. Using the chaos that Isabella had created with her surprise attack, they had managed to make it out of the Horkos camp and back to her horse, where she then threw Thomas over the horse to secure him and make sure that he didn't fall off. After doing so, she felt a small hand tugging at her standards. He's gonna be okay, right? Isabella didn't answer right away, scared of the truth herself. Regardless, she steeled herself and knelt to the kid's level. "He'll be fine, but we need to focus on getting out of here, okay?" Isabella gently ruffled the kid's hair before nudging them to another member of the Legion as they began to travel back to the fort. Isabella walked alongside her horse, looking over Thomas and his condition closely. Until finally, a weak voice spoke out. Did we manage to escape?" "Yes, and you're going to be fine. Just hold out a bit longer and stay awake for me, okay?" Isabella spoke frantically, trying to keep herself held together as best as she could. Fear slowly creeped into her eyes as she saw the light fading from Thomas's own. "Tell everyone I'm sorry for everything. Thomas's voice slowly faded as he fell limp, and the light forever faded from his eyes. As Isabella and the rescued Iron Legion members returned, many celebrated their safe return. While everyone was praising Isabella for single-handedly saving the imprisoned Legion members, Isabella couldn't shake the empty void that was slowly eating away at her. She found herself standing alone, underneath a tree that was overlooking a gravestone next to a valley of white roses. Thomas's longsword held tightly within her hands as she stared at what forever would be perceived as her greatest failure: his death. It was then she realized what it was she saw in Thomas when they first met. Among all that arrogance was the confidence and bravery that rivaled even her own, if not surpassed it. Isabella decided to abandon the Iron Legion after that day, deeming herself unfit to serve as warden for it, among such a perceived failure. While rumors began to circulate about what she did after she had left, some saying she had met with an old whelp that too was part of the Iron Legion, some saying she became a mercenary to work closer with those that she had sworn to protect. Despite whatever rumors were told, whether they be true or not, no matter what, fresh flowers always seemed to rest beside a lone gravestone, under a tree, in a valley of white roses. Hello, and if you are seeing this, I'm assuming you have either A, have seen the story of Isabella just now, or B, you don't care about spoilers and just skip to the part where I build the character. This will be the only chance I'm going to give you to go back and listen to the story again before I get into any spoilers. So if you skipped to this part of the video just to see how I build the character, once again, I will be going into spoilers for the story, so just so you know, just so that we're clear. As you can see, this is Isabella, and I really spent a lot of time on this redesign for her, because previously she looked like one edgy son of a gun, and now I'm really happy with how she turned out, like visually. So without further ado, let's get into how to build her. So the first thing you want to do is go for the Ledric helmet, the Imperious chest, the Dullahan arms. So once again, the Ledric helm, the Imperious chest, and the Dullahan arms, and that is how you create the armor. Now for the sword is a bit interesting because it's not actually Isabella's sword that I'm using here. This is Thomas's sword that she sort of takes as her own at the end of the legend that I somewhat hint towards her doing. So how you build Thomas's sword is you use the Our Lady of Serenity blade, the gold Alistair hilt, and the Divine Right guard. Once again, that is the Our Lady of Serenity blade, the golden Alistair hilt, and the Divine Right guard. Honestly, probably one of my favorite weapon combinations. I do wish that the hilt was like more in line with the gold that we see everywhere else on the blade, but I don't think it's too distracting from the look because, you know, it blends pretty well. But if you wanted to make Isabella's own sword, the one that she had when she first charged into the camp, I would use the Rogan blade, the Gardakan hilt, and the Gylean guard, and it would look somewhat like this. And here's how it would look on Isabella. But yeah, this is how I would build Isabella's normal weapon, but for the sake of the, story and video, this is what I would go with for her official design. Okay, good. For traits, default 1, Isabella is very clearly a woman within the story. Skin color doesn't really matter, you don't see Warden's skin anyway. For the head, no paint pattern, no symbol, and for the embossing, you want the Paisley 1, which you unlock at Reputation 3, level 20. For the ornament, you want the winged ornament. This cost, I believe, around 3,000 steel to unlock, so you don't really need to do anything besides get a bit of steel. And the reason why I chose this ornament, actually, was because when paired with this helmet specifically, I thought it somewhat resembled a warmonger's helmet, which was actually a relevant piece of Isabella's story before I rewrote it, I eventually scrapped uh, the idea that Isabella repurposed her armor from a warmonger in the version of the story that you just listened to. But yeah, I still really like the helmet design. I think it really looks good, especially with the embossing on the like little shutter thing. I don't know the actual proper term for that. I'm probably gonna have to look that up eventually. For the right shoulder, no paint pattern, no symbol, and once again the paisley embossing. And for the left shoulder, it doesn't really matter what paint pattern you go for. You just want something so that will appear 100% white when we go into the color scheme. So like any color palette that just uses the primary two colors will be fine. I don't know why there's an embossing here, actually. So once again, any paint pattern that just uses the first two primary colors, you'll be fine. No symbol, and then no embossing. For the back, once again, we do the same thing for the shoulder. You just want a color palette that uses the first two primary colors and not the third one. You want no symbol, and you want the rose embossing, which you unlock by completing the night story on realistic difficulty. So if you haven't played the campaign on realistic difficulty, you cannot build Isabella's back. This is very important to her story. If you've actually listened to it, white roses are pretty significant to her story. So make sure you get this embossing. For the standards, once again, the same trick for the shoulder and back. You just want a color palette that has the first two primary colors and just skips out on the third one. No symbol, and for the embossing, you want the helm embossing, which you unlock by playing ranked matches. Now then, if you don't want to play ranked, and I don't blame you, there are two different embossings that I don't have that would work perfectly well. The first one is the Sword Angel, which you can unlock at Reputation 12, level 20, or you can purchase for Steel early on, or you can go ahead and use the Flowers embossing, which you unlock at Reputation 23, level 20, or with Steel. Honestly, I would go with Sword Angel, and I might switch over to Sword Angel once I unlock it, but for the official look, I would use the Helm embossing, which once again you unlock by playing ranked matches. Good, good, glad. For material, we're going with basic iron. You could use silver, you could use black iron for a bit more contrast. I go for iron because I think it looks pretty well with the basic white. It really does complement each other a lot more than it really should. But you can also go with just white iron if you want to be basic and go fully white on Isabella's design here. But once again, the iron material with 0 overrides. That is the iron material, which you unlock by simply buying the game, and no overrides. For the color palette, I use the Cloudy color palette, which I unlocked at Reputation 11, level 20. Basically, any color palette that has like at least two different instances of white will work, just so that you can create like a solid look on the back. For example, Winterwood also works, which you get at Reputation 5, level 20, so a lot sooner. I believe there's an all-white color scheme that you can unlock. I'm not sure. Hold up. I'm going to look for it real quick. No, there isn't a fully white color scheme? What? Huh. There's a fully black one, which I know you can't get anymore. Yeah, so either go with Cloudy or go with Winterwoods for the color palette. Okay, good, good. For the feats, I use Retold because she really does know how to exterminate a large number of people. I use Thrilling Comeback. I use Pugus Mortis and Trebuchet to reference the sort of final act of the story where she basically blows up a giant arena of Horkos men. So the third and fourth feet definitely reference that. For the executions, we have the backhanded strike, which I believe you unlock immediately as part of the default Warden executions. We have the Wrathful Coercion, not Coercion, Concision, which is a reference to the PK fight during the Horkos camp infiltration. We have Hilt Strike, which is another default Warden execution, but I do reference this and Backhanded Strike a lot, where Isabella really likes using the pommel and garter for weapons to fight off armored opponents, so these do make for pretty good references to that. And for the final execution, which you unlock for 7,000 steel, is Grave Passing, which I chose simply because it's sort of a bit of a homage to Thomas, in a way. And Isabella is a very respectful character. But mostly I use it as a sort of homage to Thomas, as she uses her sword. Not uses her sword, uses his sword. For emotes, I just go for the default ones, because I'm not really a big fan of the emotes in this game. If you wanted to be funny, you could go for sobbing uncontrollably. If you've seen Isabella's story, you might know why that is. For this signature, I chose Blade Polish, because once again, this is Thomas's sword, and she wants to take extreme care of it after his passing. So yeah, once again, the Blade Polish signature is the one you want to go for. And finally, for effects, you don't want any. There's no mystical element to Isabella, so no effects work that well. So yeah, that is how you build Isabella. And if you were not, I don't know what I was gonna say after that. I just completely blanked. Anyway, that is how you build Isabella. So once again, a quick rundown. You want the Ledric Helm, the Imperious Chess, the Dullahan Arms, the Our Lady of Serenity Blade, the Golden Alistair Hilt, the Divine Right Guard, Default 1, default skin color, no paint pattern, no symbol, the Paisley embossing, no paint pattern, no symbol, the Paisley embossing, any paint pattern that uses the first two colors to make it white, no symbol, and no embossing. Once again, for the shoulder, you do copy that onto the back. Go ahead and use no symbol, use the rose embossing. Once again, use the same trick for the standards, no symbol, and the helm embossing with the iron material, with the winged ornament, and the winterwood color. So yeah, that is how you build Isabella, and I hope you've enjoyed her story, and who knows, maybe you might build her for yourself. This is some pretty decent fashion, I might say. So without further ado, I will not hold you up any longer. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good rest of your day. Toodaloos.